Thank you for listening. This is Gretchen Henderson, and I'm delighted to be reading from my novel, The House Enters the Street, recently published by Start Your Own Books. It's a novel of modulations. Rather than chapters, The House Enters the Street unfolds in a musical sense, akin to composition and transposition through different keys. Each storyline in the novel aligns with a different note from the diatonic scale. In other words, simply, what children learn to play or sing as do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. Rather than use those modern syllables, I adopted the original Latin phrases utqueant laxis, resonare fibris, mira gestorum, famuli tuorum, solve pollute, labiereatum, sancte Johannes, which appear in loose translation on page 128 of the published book under the heading, This is Not the Key. If you look at the image of the Guidonian hand tipped in beside what appears to be a table of contents marked modulations, you can see that the syllables ut, re, mi, etc. were written on knuckles and palms of the image of the hand. This was a means of teaching medieval choristers to sing, a method of sight singing. Turning to page 128 of the book, we find the very loose translation of Guido d'Arezzo's letter on singing unheard songs, in which he writes, "Suppose, then, that you wish to commit some note or neum to memory. You must locate that note or neum in the beginning of some melody you know very well. And for each note to be retained in the memory, you must have a melody of this sort at your beck and call, beginning on the note in question. Take this melody, for example." And then he lists the notes, and the loose and fragmented translation of what he wrote in 1030 is, "O for thy spirit, fettered tongues, chasten lips, to loosen, wonder, be chanted." To echo the translation here is too loose, since my intention isn't to have it or the novel read literally. The novel is about moving beyond any one given surface language, beyond any given expectation for the shape of a story or a novel, rather inviting listening between storylines as the narratives bump up and intermingle with one another, creating a kind of sound space or echo chamber. Thinking also in terms of narrative architecture, in modulation, you can start in one key and find leading tones and chord progressions that trend toward other keys. Oral tensions veer toward resolution, which can be composed to lead back to a home key. One of the recurring storylines in The House Enters the Street builds off the repeating motif of home, home, she's going home. Each of the storylines is told not only in a different cadence, but also appear in slightly different fonts, as you can see in these snapshots of sections from Unqueant Laxis, Resonare Fibris, and Labiereatum, the last of which incorporates parts of Resonare Fibris and Mira Gestorum. Since each key has its own character and timbre, it works also as a kind of color field that ties back to the movement and the cover painting that inspires the whole book, not to mention a kind of physics at work behind color theory and acoustics. This painting is Umberto Baccioni's La strada entra nella casa, translated variedly as The Street Enters the House, or The Noise of the Street Enters the House. The element of noise is certainly present in this cacophony of a novel that reverses his direction to become The House Enters the Street. Throughout the book, there is also a variety of typographic play, keeping the planes of pages moving in different ways. I'll mention just one more thing before jumping into reading. Although bound as a book, The House Enters the Street acts as a kind of performance in 2 acts, including an intermission in the middle of the book that is a play based on the fable of Stone Soup. Each half of the book is prefaced by an epigraph written about Baccioni's materia, and I'll start by reading those, then move into reading 3 short sections from the novel. 1. We share her view and multifold sensations as the interior literally takes in the surrounding exterior buildings and activities, and the numerous laborers are dispersed widely and forward. Houses surge into the foreground. Windows multiply across the facades of fragmented buildings. The street enters the house refers to the house of the construction site and to the larger social dimension of urban expansion, both of which compel the privacy and domesticity of the interior sanctum to confront the public interactions and boisterousness of the world outside. 2. It is at this point that Baccioni's rupture with divisionism truly begins. The 1911 painting, The Street Enters the House, depicts the sitter's circular, all-encompassing experience of the activities on the street by structuring them so they literally interpenetrate the interior space she occupies. When this work was shown in the exhibition Intima in Milan in 1911, Margherita Sarfatti wrote, "Alla famiglia artistica, Baccioni is exhibiting a painting entitled At the Balcony, later retitled The Street Enters the House, in which he means to present a comprehensive synthesis of all the impressions the woman who is at the center of the painting can experience when looking out her window, including not only the building she sees in front of her, but also those she knows to be beside and behind her." Ut queant laxis. She's going home, not straight away, crow dart of a black arrow going home, but a curvaceous, loopy, roundabout, colorful waving, goodbye, hello, good course of going home, not by plane, train, coach, or car, but by foot, through labyrinthine halls and echoing galleries, where marble athletes lack legs, hands, noses, breathing. Floor-to-ceiling canvases, blue nudes and strung guitars, headdressed gazelles with locked horns, beaded ear flaps, iron mudfish and pendant masks, breathing. Like a world conch murmuring, voyeurs whisper, stare and bend to listen. Knees crack, she hears, shuffling, and look! To incisions and scars, what doesn't speak is broken. Between each line and curve, echoes. This is what happens when there is space and time and hope, she thinks, listening while walking among pedestals and glass cases with palmette finials, rearing-maned horses, carved paws on lotus leaves beside bronze belly guards. Icenidas, the son of Cloridius, took this. Dolphin-riding hoplites, foot soldiers, flute players, incised choruses, bronze and terracotta sphinxes perched on horizontal flanges, greaves, shin guards, and spears and water jars and carnos. The receptacles probably contained foodstuffs of various kinds, perhaps also flowers. Pomegranates on oil lamps, stelae depicting ravens, and a leaping white fox, an omen to decipher as it races down a horse's back on an architectural frieze between a colonnade and funerary monument, with 2 lines of dactylic hexameter expressing grief over death in a pattern called bostrapheden, ox turning, because the text turns at the end of each line, right to left in alteration, as oxen turn a plow at each furrow's end, zigzagging like she coils through echoing galleries and labyrinthine halls, among pedestals and glass cases, she, the one among statues and foreign tongues, the one who's going home. But it's not as easy as that. Home is where the heart is, so the saying goes, and though hers beats somewhere inside this cavity, tangled muscles and twisting bones have made it hard for the pulse to be heard, while she tries to move in dreams over mountains, fording streams and oceans to sail to new ports. She feels history on her back like a weight, but a load that needs to be borne, over mountains and rivers and oceans, like the dream of an old barefoot man with a sackcloth of apple seeds who thought the world would be better when branches tangled toward sun and grew fruit, like she believes, if she takes seeds, not even knowing which kind they are. If she scatters them across earth, the old myth may come to life again, once upon a time, ever after, if she reaches out her hand to yours, and you take what she offers and swallow seeds, a tree will grow inside you, and you will bear fruit. Solve polluti. It was all about the fruits of labors, not only on land, at sea. Far's life began at sea. Waves rolled outside his window where he watched watery horizons. His father had disappeared on a voyage to terra incognita, where horned narwhals swam under ice, where profit lulled into frozen flows. The young Far began to dream of cloud lagoons, bellied sails, and wind. The wayfaring trait had been inherited. He decided to wander. Cousins on the other side of the world sent him a letter to marry their eldest daughter, Svanhart. Iowa they wrote without mentioning the distance between bordering seas. Far assumed oceans existed near their home. He was young then. By ship he departed with dried apple seeds, an overcoat, compass, and words, fjords, Bundegard, Fisker. Heading toward Hartz, he arrived ashore and rode a box that made its own clouds. Smokestacks puffed from tracks that led to black barren soil, where land spread, gaunt and gleamed. It was April. The Hart's wooden barn jutted against a flat farm and overgrown sky, a first sight that made the young man lonely. He felt anchored between one ocean and another, moored because his new family lived landlocked. They did not feel the pull of tides. Or so he guessed. It was barely spring. He married the girl from the letter, Svani Lars Rune. Seeds were planted in earth and watered for growth. Rains came thundering. Days after storms, sun rifled tufts to make fields glimmer like oceans. Stalks drowned in rows. The barn's body hid, with its roof sailing like an upside-down skiff. Slowly, Far grew to love his inland sea. Liquid layers seeped into his dreams and yielded new sights Far had not imagined. At harvest he shucked closed ears. The land was deheaded and foddered, and new tides advanced. White, heavy drifts whirled and moaned. Snowpacks coiled in frozen crusts. Other winds carried freshfall like foam, like white spiders flung to the wind, unfurling blanched gossamer strands. Flakes met drifts and covered everything, the fields, barn, trees whose branches stretched bare, then budded above snowdrops and crocuses. Movements continued, all 4 seasons, after he reaped roots for Svan, so she grew in more with the birth of their daughters. There were 3 daughters, Eva, Una, Holde, 3 in 1, 1 in 3, born the same day. The year was 1910. Before the girls knew words were words, Far cradled them and chanted language that grew from fjords and fisker, krapsju and tunsju, choppy short waves, hard, heavy water. He described dwellings on cave walls, Shinimir, Odin, Thor. He told of trolls, elves, giants, Veter, Draugens, sprites who swam in the sea, and witches who dressed as insects and held possessions to make owners victims. The giant who had no heart in his body hid his separated soul in common objects, an egg, a duck, a well, an island, a far-off lake. When the triplets grew to realize losses could be found, they sought bits of the giant's heart, estranged in tree stumps, jars, nests, and ponds. More than blood and bones, Far's stories made the daughters realize their watery composition, which could pulse this or that to the surface, or bear things away in this newfound sea. Losses were always waiting to be found, buried under deheaded cornstalks, stored in the cellar with Moore's preserves, nested in knotholes of trees whose suckled groundwater. Roots rerooted the girls as stories transformed their senses, sights into sounds, touches into smells, tastes into colors. In summer's heat-blazed roads, mirages revealed liquid horizons and conjured the taste of tears. New senses ripened with each new connection, this with that, here to there, before with after, life with death. The girls were born on the day, same year. That suggested a pattern, but everything didn't follow the same course. Holde, the third of the 3, died at 4 years. She tried to comfort a rabid fox in a corn crib, and its teeth marks led her to follow its fits and foaming. The family had no forget-me-nots, bright blue or white, arranged in a curving spike, a remedy against serpent bites, syphilis, and mad dogs, to feed her dying mind. Her shreds a little black frock, tucked in a tight pine box built by far. She died in winter, and her body remained in a corner of the barn by the stenched pig pen until the ground thawed and spring popped through snow. To the remaining sisters, the loss of their likeness was the loss of part of themselves. They had been 1 and 3, 3 and 1, and could exist only in proportion. The triplets became twins to those who observed them, in name only, because their dead sister lit her spirit between them. How else could everything be explained? Hulda hid the rest of herself in tree stumps, jars, nests, and bones. I'll read just one more short section from one of the 7 storylines. Again, each of these come back and retreat and interweave over the course of the novel. This section comes from Famuli Tuorum. Sift your fingers through double-braced barrels of kernels of corn. You have no trouble grasping at this moment in time. Gather handfuls of kernels to fill the basin in your arms. At the village pump, swizzle the parched seeds. Keep water flowing, pump and release, pump and release. The action requires repetition, muscles solidified by labor, strength you have not previously needed. After cleaning the kernels, shuttle the basin to a lean-to with a fire kindled before dawn. Twigs poke from a hollowed-out stone that will blister your touch if you don't take care. Beside the hot rock, there's a tarnished grinder. Grit grainy paste through the shredding sieve. The paste should hesitate, then curl before falling onto a rolling slab. With a pestle passed down through generations, urge the pulp flat, flatter. Gather the cohesion into a ball to shape between your palms. Turn it forward and forward, rotate and pat, again, flat. Your circle is thin, but not supermarket thin, palm-sized sustenance that you place raw and imperfect, since you are learning, on the scorching stone to sizzle. Pockets of air rise as it heats, freckles, and browns. Remove it to add to the growing pile of steaming discs wrapped in a cloth, warm. You eat the tortillas with her, a grandmother. You talk of lost children and wait. As boiled milk cools, your tongue burns. Too hot. Wait, so ground cinnamon won't stick to your lips. The milk came from a goat across the lane, offered after it bleated and kicked, and a knowing hand cradled its neck to calm. The hand was not yours because you are a foreigner. You do not know how to assuage a goat, or the meaning of calm. You watch, hungry for knowledge not learned in books, imagining the wise fingers on your slender neck. Greedy eyes, she calls you in soft laughs, as she senses you want to be generous, but are learning. You forget that sunrise is a habit because you have no blinds on your windows. Instead of glass, wooden sockets frame a vegetable world. Banana trees, coffee plants, and palms grow lush among D-headed cornstalks, hollowed houses, stone-littered roads. In afternoons, thunder grumbles over the valley. Silence defines sound because it is evasive. There is always the undermurmur of cicadas and the river. At night, too. There is always the undermurmur of cicadas, the river, behind the buzz, breezes, bombs, undermurmur, guns, fire. Don't breathe or scream. This happens again as before. Through wooden shutters, skeins of sunlight sketch hammocks as colored cobwebs, pinned among sleeping bats, hidden wings. Droppings scatter a doorway lit by dusk, an uninhabited yard, hollowed stone oven, an awning, rusted drain pipes, scuttling chickens, hole in the ground. Under your hammock, moonlight seeps around shifting bodies, creaking beams. Snoring, rustling, screeching, dark arcs slip out the door, flights soft as whispers. The sky cracks, stars. Falling on the ground, you crawl to a cracked wall to see stars in the street dancing, the neighboring house aflame. Se de, not a word. Si queda, se cigarra, si guerra, si. Through the valley, the river rims a dusty road and twists from your surrogate community, Las Vueltas, the turns you learn the meaning, to villages beyond the verdant ridge, pocked hills, mountains, camps bordering there, a route of repatriation. Here she comes behind the lean-to through the dirt yard. It's night. A candlelight's ringed glow catches her shadow as she raises her wrinkled hand to speak to you. She trusts you with words, how the soldiers came and took her pregnant daughter, opened her on a rock, and made birth a double funeral. She thinks you will protect stories like you protect your own life, no longer. You learn the fecundity of stories, how one gives birth to another, and cradle her words as she taught you to nurture tortillas, to rotate them again and again. She grasps your unblemished fingers before disappearing into darkness. This section continues, but I'll stop there to end by speaking more generally about the genre of novels. As I've mentioned before, The House Enters the Street is a productive failure of a novel, and I'd like to wager that aspect of the genre allows it to be formally capacious enough to push against its own conventions, allowing Cervantes to keep company with Kathy Acker, Mary Shelley with Shelley Jackson, and so many more. The heroic epithets of Homer's epics were shaped by its oral transmission. The roles of bookbinder and printer gave rise to the typographic play of Lawrence Stern's Tristram Shandy. The cliff-hanging chapter ends of Charles Dickens arose from his novel's serialization. Since the medium delivers the message, now is a particularly exciting time to be writing novels, as technology evolves and influences the way we write and package and share our stories, often warping them across platforms like a funhouse of mirrors. The House Enters the Street isn't built integrally between print and digital realms, but my other novel, Galerie Formatée, deliberately plays between its material and virtual constraints, collaboratively deforming its story over years, contexts, and media, allying itself with Henry James's classification of the genre of the novel as a baggy monster. All this is to say, the novel as a genre has never been fixed, and I'm excited to see and hear and touch and sense what you who are listening to this might create in the future. Thank you for listening.